Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special edition of the Media Boat Podcast. It's December, and lists are due, as you are now listening to the year-end wrap-up show that we've done every year since we've started this podcast. My name is Mike. His name is Matt.
My name is Matt. His name is Mike. Thank you for joining us today on this special year-end wrap-up edition of the Media Boat Podcast. If you're new to us, basically what we do at the end of every year is we wrap up the year in a nice, tidy little package for you by deciding what the most important news story was in each of our sections, those being movies, video games, television, and uh,
Music.
music, not necessarily in that order. And then we decide after we've decided that, we tell you what our top five personal things were in that category. Then, last but not least, we decide one thing to crown as the best thing according to Media Boat Podcast in that category this year.
Yep. Normally, we go through everything that we talk about throughout the entire year, but
Yeah.
we're trying to keep these into an hour podcast and not the 2 hours and a half that you've come to know and love, by the way. So, in order to truncate all that,
Yeah.
we've already gone through all the stories for the year and we've narrowed them down to just a couple that we're going to talk about real briefly and crown one story before we get into what everyone's interested in, our top five lists.
Yes,
So,
everyone.
with all those rules, ground rules set, let's get right into today's topic with the music section. We start the music section with the Billboard. We start the Billboard with the
No,
Hot
no,
100.
no, we don't. We
Is
do.
Billboard not the top story of the year?
No, it's not. But I hear that you have narrowed it down for us between two major stories that can decide upon which is the biggest story of the year. What are those stories?
Yes, well, the first major story is the return of Lincoln Park, everybody.
Is it?
Okay, it's not. While that is a big story in and of itself, it is not the one of the two stories that dominated the music news cycle.
No.
And both of them are kind of have their own like merits towards them. The first one being Kendrick and Kendrick Lamar versus Drake.
Yeah.
That ongoing feud that happened this year that ultimately gave Kendrick Lamar the bid to host the Super Bowl halftime show and allowed Drake to sue Universal Music Group for claiming to artificially pump up Kendrick Lamar's numbers when they were
Yeah.
feuding.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, this didn't start this year. It has its origins back a handful of years. Kendrick has always kind of had beef with Drake. He's always kind of doubted Drake's talent, doubted how Drake came up so fast. Um, Notably, has pointed out Drake's alleged use of ghostwriters instead of writing all the songs himself. So yeah, it's been known that he kind of didn't like the guy, but yeah, it kind of went into overdrive this year. And yeah, going hand in hand with that was the sudden success and revitalization of Kendrick's career. All of a sudden, he has a number one hit on the Billboard charts. It's literally everywhere. It just so happens that it's also a song dragging Drake. And he releases a brand new surprise album, GNX, to critical acclaim. And yeah, it just like came out of nowhere. And in, like you said, it's going to continue into 2025 as he hosts. I did the same thing you did as he performs for the Super Bowl halftime show. So it's definitely a strong argument there. However, when you boil it down, it is just two people. It's not necessarily the entire industry really working, but it is kind of representative of where we're at with rap and with culture and kind of with music streaming, where a song can go viral, as he would say, if like just on the merits of, oh man, isn't it crazy how hard he's going at Drake?
Yeah, well,
Uh,
not just like that, but also like he threw out some music videos too. Like you said, he had
yeah,
the extra album. Um, this is has been going back and forth, and it wasn't until that weekend in April did all this kind of boil to a head where they released track after track after track on each other.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, with all that, while that definitely dominated the news charts and the album and the Billboard charts, and most of our talking points, there was one other story that dominated not just the music headlines, but kind of all headlines. And we've been skirting around it during our normal year end or during our
Yeah.
normal podcasts. But I think now it's time to, I don't want to say crown because that's kind of the wrong word, but I don't want to say reward because it's not really rewarding it. But I think we have to ultimately give the whole Diddy allegations and arrest
Yeah.
and sex trafficking and everything surrounding it the story of the year.
I
However ugly
yeah,
that kind of looks and sounds.
I think you're right. And why I think you're right is because, well, one, I don't think I've been skirting around it. I've been including news stories when they are available for this. Because yeah, it is kind of a big deal. Like here we have a a legendary figure, for better or for worse, of the hip hop world since early on in hip hop, a mogul in the industry, someone who ran a record label, very successful hip hop record label, gave a lot of artists their start, had a storied like career ups and downs, ultimately to kind of see this fate, a fate that he had been building himself for years. This notorious party atmosphere ended up having a dark side. And now that we're finally finding out what the dark side was, his legacy and his respect and all that is just gone, is just poof, puff, if you will, in smoke. And yeah, like just he just completely just now that the secrets are out, it's time. I'm glad that he's getting his comeuppance and people are seeing him for what he was the whole time. But yes, you're right. It goes far beyond just P. Diddy the man because you have other artists getting like tied into this. You have other discoveries happening where who knows how deep this rabbit hole goes and who was involved. It's wild and it's only going to continue. Like we're going to find out more in 25 about like who else is connected to these parties, what else we can find out and how severe the punishment will be for Diddy. And yeah, it's like it's something that is just wild to think about even 20 years ago that we'd end up here.
Yeah, I mean, this whole saga started back in March when Diddy's home in Miami was raided by the FBI and Homeland Security. Just a surprise out of nowhere. It just hit the news. And then where's the next one? Yeah,
But yeah.
then it started out with his son being accused too of sexual assault and drugging women in a new lawsuit
Yeah, like
before
you
being
said,
ultimately
yeah.
charged in September.
Yeah, like you said, it's not the prettiest story, and like obviously it's very dark, what happened and what occurred. But in a way, it's good that we're having accountability. Like, right? Like we've been talking
Mhm.
about this the last handful of years. Is like, this is the promise of the Me Too movement in a lot of ways. Where like finally these powerful men who use their power incorrectly and were never found culpable for it, and stories would come out and get smushed finally is getting the punishment that he deserves and is finally getting aired out and these secrets are out and they're no longer secret and they're like we're finding getting to the bottom of this horrible reality and yeah in a way it's good that this thing's out and like out in the open and getting taken care of because damn this guy's messed up like I mean that's an understatement but
Mhm.
wow.
Yeah, I don't think we need to talk about it anymore
Right.
because even though he was arrested this year,
Yeah.
trial set for next year
Right.
and the sentencing after that. So
So we'll see.
this still failure that will continue into 2025 when actual like court proceedings start to
Yep.
occur. And we'll see who else gets brought into these lawsuits as well.
Yep.
All right. So Diddy, our 2024 music story of the year.
Yeah, it's like the Time Person of the Year, right? It's like we don't necessarily bestow the award on good things. It's just
Yes.
the most important thing.
Yes. That's a great way to looking at it.
Although this was at the very tail end, but I want to put an honorable mention in. I don't know if you saw my Blue Sky post about it yesterday. But so music journalist Liz Pelly has blown the lid off of Spotify this week. She's putting out a book. soon about the Spotify algorithm. But to kind of open the opening salvo of this is she did a cover story for Harper's Magazine in which she gets to the bottom of the ghost artist
Hmm.
conspiracy on Spotify about these like artists coming from nowhere. Well, she did some reporting and some digging and found out exactly what Spotify was doing to create this. It's a fascinating report. I don't want to blow the whole thing here, but if you're interested at all, so you can see it on my Blue Sky. I posted a link to it. There's a two article read limit on Harper's, but certainly like me, you've probably never read anything on there, so you're fine. But yeah, I recommend it. It's a good read. Gets to the bottom of it and like the nefarious scheme that Spotify was doing secretly behind closed doors to get these fake artists on their playlist to basically monopolize the listening numbers to get basically cheaper royalties to boost Spotify numbers. It's crazy. So maybe
It-
next year, or
hmm.
maybe next year, this is the seeds to the story of the year.
I was wondering if that is that different from the ghost story or the ghost not the ghost ones, the fake artists where they would skew the artist names and titles just a bit.
No, that's something else. This is similar, but not exactly the same thing.
Okay. All right, because we had that story with Spotify as well. And we had another story with Spotify about how one guy was using AI and bots to artificially pump up his own album
Right.
without like having like actual music. So those they would Spotify would pay out the minutes,
Yeah.
even if they weren't like actual people listening to it.
Right. Yeah. I think yeah, looking into 2025, keep an eye on Spotify because some things are boiling under the surface there.
All right. Well, what needs to boil over the surface and out to everyone's ears now is our top five lists.
Indeed.
All right. Do you want to go first or should I go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. I'll get through these pretty quick because, like every year, these are not albums that we talked a whole lot about on the show. Some of them are actually, but some of them are not. So I'll be brief.
To be fair, last year you only had one album that we talked on the show on your top five.
I believe that will be the same case here.
Okay.
Maybe. But yeah, so let's start at number five with an album that I did actually have you listen to, but I don't know how you were driving. I don't know how much you were paying attention. My number five was a surprise for me this year, not an artist that I was on board with until recently, but it is the album Manning Fireworks by MJ Linderman. So MJ Linderman, guitarist in the band Wednesday, a band that I talked about last year in my top five. He has had a solo career for a few years now, but I hadn't checked his solo stuff out until now. But man, am I glad I did. So Manning Fireworks is kind of a country inspired record, but it kind of leans into that rough guitar sound that he has in Wednesday and his other work. It's a little cleaner production than his previous record, but in this case, it totally worked for me. Just the guitar virtuosity happening here and the relatableness of the lyrics just like it's a great kind of concept record about like when you're in your 30s and or late 20s or 30s and you're looking at yourself as like guy, especially like a straight guy, and being like, man, I was kind of awful when I was younger and I'm working on myself and I think I'm better, and like maybe I'm not a jerk anymore, but who really knows. That's such a relatable feeling for me. And so like yeah, to have like that an album about that and also sound as good as it is, it was a winner easily for me. Just like the little details sprinkled in, like you mentioned on one song, staying up late playing Guitar Hero, and like, yep, been there. Uh, but yeah, I love it. I love a thing that's about bettering yourself, and I love it from the perspective of hey, someone just like me, and like so it was cool just to hear that and kind of and enjoy it this year. Fun fact, MJ Linderman also shows up on an album that barely didn't make my top five this year, Waxahachie's Tiger's Blood, which yeah, I just want to mention. I'm gonna do proper honorable mentions later, but yeah, I just wanted to mention that because man, that's also a great record, and it's barely my number six. So I just wanted to shout out Waxahachie real quick. So that's number five. Moving on to number four, the album nobody could shut up about this year, but for good reason. My number four is Brat by Charlie XCX. Um, So yeah, it would be higher here, honestly, if it wasn't such a good year. Also, if Mean Girls wasn't on the record, because I don't really like that song. But the rest of the album is wonderful. It's finally like the promise of Charlie XCX delivered. Like, I am so happy that she had immense success finally, and with an album that she didn't really have to compromise on. This is an album that sound largely returns to kind of the abrasive club music that she was making in 2020 with How I'm Feeling Now, and before that with Pop 2. Like, she didn't have to make a big mainstream move to, ironically enough, make her a big mainstream move. Like, society kind of caught up with her in a lot of ways. Like, culture was ready for where Charlie was heading with Brat. Of course, it helps, with like an amazing, like came out of nowhere like marketing effort. Like everybody was talking about Brat Summer and the bright green color was everywhere. She was doing the late night circuit. She was showing up on pretty much anything that will have her. And like again, just the fact that she was able to do it with an album as strong and as innovative and interesting as this is a testament to where she's at as a songwriter. I think this is some of her strongest songs to date. I mean, just think about the track list here, like 360, Sympathy is a Knife, uh, like Apple, like there's so many strong pop songs on this thing. And that's not even digging into the emotional core. Because like on its surface, it seems like, oh, party girl record. Like this is just a pop party girl album. And a lot of it is. But also inside of it is kind of this portrait of Charlie as again, kind of this like self-reflective person in their 30s, kind of thinking about like, well, where am I at? Like, what's next for me? Should I get married and have a kid? Like, I'm in love with this guy. Like, I've been thinking about it all the time. Like, what do I do next? Do I end my career for a family? Like the fact that there's that kind of thought happening here is fascinating. But I want to dig into one last thing before I wrap up, Brad, that I'm personally fascinated with this record. And it has to do with most specifically Sympathy is a Knife. Like this, I think 2024 is a year where we can look back and be like, oh, wow, like the pop community had an inward look at itself. Like you have Charlie singing about, I'm uncomfortable around Taylor Swift because of how big of a celebrity she is. You also had Taylor Swift saying, I'm uncomfortable with my fans and my stardom in Tortured Poets, another album, honorable mention, we will not be talking about on my list today. Believe it or not, yes, a media vote first. A Taylor Swift album came out and it's not on my top five. Um, and then yeah, and then you have of course Lorde jumping on to the remix of Girl So Confusing and having kind of like a heart to heart with Charlie in a song that Charlie wrote about not feeling like not knowing how Lorde felt about her. And that was a crazy moment. Just like the moment in the remix where Lorde says, I ride for you, Charlie, is such a like genuine, pure, like kind of like goosebumps moment for me every time. It's just like it's such a cool moment in pop. And the fact that Brat made all that happen, well, besides the Taylor stuff, like is it it's a record we're gonna be thinking about for a very long time, and definitely will stay on repeat around here. It's just yeah, it's great, and I'm glad it had its cultural moment.
All right, now I don't know if the other album's on there, but is this specifically Brat or is this Brat but not quite, but different?
You could wrap both of those into the same, but I'm talking about the original. I
Okay.
didn't listen to the remix album as much. It is very strong, but some of the remixes work better than others. I didn't love all of them. Why bother with Julian Casablancas? He doesn't need to be here. But like yeah, like I think the original is still the stronger record, and I think that it's the one that will stand the test of time.
All right.
All right.
But what's ahead of that at number three?
Number three, I have I Got Heaven by Mannequin Pussy. Yes, it gives me an opportunity to say pussy on this podcast. Uh, not that I would have any other opportunity to do that. Yeah, Mannequin Pussy is a band that's been on my list before here on the Media Boat podcast, but their newest one, it may be their best. Just they have a knack for balance is their thing. Like they have an angry and loud side, but they also have like a very soft and melodic pop side. They do both on this record, and I think it's like a just a great example of the kind of range that they do have. But also thematically, there's this balance between the like this like carnal lust almost and like a sweet kind of romance. And it bounces between the two. I mean, there's a reason why they've literally named an album Romance before. Like they're very much this is kind of the thematic ideas that are kind of circling around in their heads. Um yeah, it's a heavy record, but with also a lot of substance behind it. Like, and it's sad to me that such a hard rocking rock album did not make a dent in the rock categories in the Grammys this year. Like last, we talked briefly about this when the nominations came out for the Grammys. But it's sad to see the rock category, which was pretty much dominated by women last year, is just not doesn't have any women in it this year. And when this album is sitting right there, does the Academy just not want to say pussy? Probably. But like it's just disappointing because like this is such a strong rock record in a year that where there wasn't a whole lot of strong rock records recognized by the mainstream. So yeah, was this their breakthrough moment? No, but I think it's coming, and hopefully they won't have to compromise by changing their name. But yeah, I definitely recommend it. If you like just classic rock, not classic rock, but like a classic space rock record. It's good stuff. All right. Number two, I have Utopia Now by Rosie Tucker. Rosie Tucker is a personal favorite of mine. I actually saw them this year in concert, which was great. Probably the best show I went to this year. They're such a great pop, like indie pop band with a little bit of a pop punk influence. Like they just kind of write whatever they're thinking. And it's that stream of consciousness element of it that adds to kind of like the element of surprise and novelty to it. And they just have a knack for writing hooks, just hooks on top of hooks on top of hooks. The song Suffer Like You Mean It on this record is the hookiest pop punk song that never came out in 2007. It is so, so good. And it is just like pure goodness. And I just can't describe it without like just playing it because it's such a great song. But that's not where it ends. There's like five perfect bangers on this thing. Some of them are back to back. It is just like there's a string of songs on this thing that are just incredible. And it all kind of paired with Rosie Tucker's just impeccable lyricism. Here's an example of a line that Rosie sings on this record. A paragon of puritanical panoptical persistence. Say that 5 times fast.
No, thank you. That's a lot of peas. I'm gonna pop my mic if I do that.
See, I have a pop shield for this exact situation. But yeah, also she has an act, or they have, sorry, they have an act for really great song titles. All My Exes Live in Vortexes is one of the songs here. It's great. So yeah, I recommend Rosie Tucker if you want something a little off, like a little out of left field, a little bit more indie, but still just a fun experiment in pop songwriting. And I think it's just strong all the way through. Speaking of experimental pop songwriting,
I say you have your number one though.
yes, my number one is the best example of that of the year. And man, do I love this album. It's Imaginal Disc by Magdalena Bay. So Magdalena Bay, another band that has showed up in my top five previously in the last few years. But this, man, they knocked it out of the park with this. So Imaginal Disc is a pop record, but it's also a concept record and also kind of a sci-fi story record. Yeah, I know that you might be interested in such a thing as you are a big fan of what's her
Just
name?
like concepts, just like genres.
Yeah,
Like when they stick
concepts
to
in general.
when they stick to a theme and they run it all the way through.
Yeah. So this is that. Imaginal Disc basically tells a story loosely of some sort of device that you insert into yourself that like I'm not really sure what it does. It might clone you or it might like produce an alternate version of you. I don't know. It's kind of vague. It's not really the point to know exactly what it does. It's more of a vibe. And Magdalena Bay nails the vibe. So what they do is kind of pop music. It's a little disco, it's a little prog, but it's put in a blender to sound super modern and experimental. Like I think the last time we had a band like this was Churches, like that sounded like the future. Like Magdalena Bay sounds like the future, like in 2024. They sound like no other band out there. They're making unique music that just like goes across genres and it like sounds like nothing else. It's just little soundscapes. Like each one is doing something different. It kind of feels like a lived-in sci-fi world. And it's paired with a lot of like their videos are very like unite this very visual like the world. Again, that image of the disc going into the forehead, which is the album cover, is also imitated in the music videos, and even in their late night performances. They did, I think they did Colbert, or maybe the Tonight Show, and they like the imagery alongside that they did with the songs is just like the weirdest, wildest shit. But it works and it's great. And I really, really love this record. It's one of the best back to like front to back listens of the year because it's again, it's just transformative. It's just like you just feel like you're in that world when you go into it, like when you listen to it every single time. It's long, but it doesn't feel long. But yeah, I'm just so excited for them. This is only their second full length album. They have way more in the tank. I want to see what they do because yeah, they're absolutely a favorite of mine, and this thing is just such a unique experience.
So you're hopping on the bandwagon early now.
Well,
I
I
mean,
was
you
there.
you tell me you were there
Yeah,
at the beginning with the first
yeah,
album too.
yeah. I was there before. Yeah, that first album also great. But yeah, this is on another level. This is definitely a breakthrough moment for them.
All right. So interesting picks considering we didn't talk about anything except for one of them.
Right. I'll toss out a few honorable mentions. I just want to mention, yeah, Tortured Poets Department by Taylor Swift. Not good enough to show up even on my top 10. However, I do want to mention it here just because, again, just like early, like I said earlier, wild record, just a wild record for her to
Mhm.
put out, something that nobody expected from her. Just put all these volleys against her own fans, calling them vipers and empaths clothing and stuff like that. Basically saying like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm Taylor Swift. But at the same time, also putting out a song that's like, oh yeah, remember when I seemed so happy during my Eras tour? Actually, I was miserable and I've been depressed and I'm a borderline alcoholic now. Thanks. It's just such a wild record, and I can't still almost a calendar year later. I can't believe that she did that. Like, I can't believe that this is a thing that she put her name out, stamped, and put it out as her big new statement, like of who she is as an artist in 2024. It's bizarre. Like, I just don't understand it. But anyway, other honorable mentions. Forever by Charlie Bliss, their third record, maybe one of their best. It's so good. I mentioned Tiger's Blood by Waxahachie. Honestly, if I want to put it in here, if there was more than five. I also want to shout another band that I discovered this year, Wishy, with their album 777. There was kind of a shoegaze renaissance this year, and Wishy is just on the edge of that. I guess the Zoomers love shoegaze. I don't know. I don't know. Sure. But yeah, so that's a really great record that I really love this year. And then two kind of more pop leaning shout outs. Short and Sweet by Sabrina Carpenter. Way better than I thought it was going to be. Probably the one of the best pop records of the year. Just edged out Ariana and Billy for that spot for me this year. And then Biba Doobie, This Is How Tomorrow Moves, Biba Doobie's new record. Yeah, it just barely made my top 10. It's at the edge of it. It's number 10, but still pretty good. Just not quite as good as Beatopia, which I still think is the best thing she's done. But yeah, there's a lot of good songs on it.
All right. Well, I'll roll into my honorable mentions then and some of the items that missed my top
Mhm.
five, including one that I was surprised you didn't bring up, The Great Impersonator by Halsey.
Just too inconsistent for me. I think that there are great songs on it, and it's a fascinating thing. But also, it's way too long. There's too many experiments that don't work, and ultimately, a concept that maybe was flawed to begin with.
It's also a very heavy album that if you're not in
Yeah,
the right headspace to get into it,
yeah.
it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks and you're like, what am I in? What am I in for?
Mm, mm,
However,
yeah.
on the flip side of that, in a very much happier album, My Favorite Dream by the legend, comma John, which was a very like melodic, like kind of an album for his kid. But it's nice to
Yeah,
hear John Legend like basically singing kid songs and like even creating some stuff
yeah.
for his own. But it's just puts a smile on your face. I have a smile face right now just
And we'll
talking about it.
probably, yeah,
Yeah.
probably
So
will
if you,
win him another Grammy because it is nominated in the children's album category.
it probably will. You don't compete with John Legend in pretty much any category. Also barely making my list, and just some staples that you normally see on there, including Kenny Chesney with Born and Midland with Barely Blue. Neither of them hit the highs that they're kind of known for, but just want to give them quick shout outs just because, like, they're still good albums. I still like what they did with them. They're just not quite hitting the gotta put it on my list for this year.
Yeah.
Um, New band that I found that I'm enjoying and that I actually went back and listened to their discography, State Champs. Uh, Getting into that
The other
alt
Midland.
rock.
Oh,
No. They're getting to that alt
no.
rock feeling that I used to be a part of, and just listening to that and then listening to all the other bands that also sound like them, like, hey, this genre never went away. I'm the one who went away from them.
Yep.
And lastly, that barely missed my if I could put number six on here, I would. It's Dua Lipa, one of my favorites, with
Hmm.
Radical Optimism.
I forgot that
And
happened.
well, one, yes, you forgot that happened, but two, it never hit the same highs as Future Nostalgia, which was my number one album of
Yeah.
2020.
I will say Illusion, still a banger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's still got good songs, it's still got good albums. They're all strong, but not like I'm gonna blast this on the radio. I want to listen to this whole thing through like Future Nostalgia was, which
Yeah.
was by far and away my favorite album. Still a Dua Lipa fan. Don't get me wrong on that. It's just that the recent album, Radical Optimism, not quite hitting all those highs that I would have liked to see.
Yeah.
And I don't think it got kind of like the cultural reception as well. Also, having a song named Houdini with Eminem's Houdini, I think kind of torpedoed it as well.
I mean, the Eminem song came much later.
Oh, I know.
And also was worse.
Also, Eminem had an album.
That's
That's
happened, but that happens practically every year.
yes, it happened. All right. So let's get into my top five. And while it didn't appear on your list, it's gonna make it on mine, squeaking into the top five. Because is it really a media boat end of the year list if it doesn't have Taylor Swift on it?
Wow, I can't believe this made your top five.
I can't either. But like I said, I would have put Dua Lipa here. But I think Torture Poets Department has a lot better songs, a lot more that I'm going to go back and listen to on a consistent basis. I think that it's hits more, it hits harder, has more to say than Radical Optimism, and
Yeah.
ultimately, I it's this album that she's been working on since the tour started, since she broke up, hence the name of Torture Poets Department. So I think there's a lot going into it that she expresses on this album,
Mhm.
and there's just a lot more that I'm more willing to go back to and have it like stuck in my head than other albums.
Question: is this just the album proper, or are you including the anthology tracks here?
No, not the anthology, just the album proper.
Fair enough.
I only want the 1 hour album, okay? I don't want the extra hour or
But
45
so
minutes
high
attached to
school.
it. It is, it's so petty. I didn't like it. But
Okay.
I mean, like, I like when Florence shows up.
Mhm.
Fortnite's actually a good pop song. It gets stuck.
Yeah,
The chorus gets an earworm.
I mean, to be fair, it's not okay. I wrote a lot. You can look up my thoughts post that I put up on the website. I think that's the last big thing I wrote for the website, actually. But yeah, I don't think it's a bad album. I don't think it's bad, to be fair. I think there are great songs on it. Actually, I did my wrap up playlist for the year, and the Daddy I Love Him ended up being the one that I chose for the album or for the playlist off the album. And yeah, I think it's a great song, but when you're talking about Taylor, like there's some you have to the one thing that always sticks in my mind about reviews and criticism in general is what Roger Ebert had said about what his approach was, which is when he reviews a film, he compares it to other similar films. And that's how he compares it. So it's not apples to oranges like, oh, this comedy is better than this, period drama. He's only comparing that comedy to other comedies, right? And so like to me, I think like Tortured Poets is not a bad album when you compare it to like other kinds of music, but if you compare it to other Taylor Swift albums, it's a weird outlier. It's like a black sheep. And like this is the thing, right? Like it's like but it has great songs on it.
Well, I mean, I think it's that way because she announced that this album was coming out when she won the Grammy for Best Pop Vocal Album,
Yeah.
basically basically kind of calling her shot, saying, "I'm winning this Grammy right now, but just wait, I've got another album, and I'll be back here winning this again."
Well, we'll see. I doubt it. She
I
has
don't think
stronger
so either.
competition than ever before, I think, with Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan. Then yeah, so I don't know. I don't know if she's going to pull it out.
Probably not, but that's also why it's at my top. It barely cracks my top five.
Hmm, hmm.
Coming in at four, another artist that at one point topped my end of the year list, topped our end of the year list, and good to see a bounce back from their previous album, Starcrossed. I'm talking about Casey Musgrave's
Yes.
Deeper Well. This
Yeah.
is technically her sixth studio album coming out, and I love that each song is indistinguishable of each other. I like the first one that came out, Deeper Well. I like all the other songs on it too. It kind of starts really slow and melodic, but the more you get into it, the more you get sucked into it, the more you're like, this is getting good. I like the songwriting on here. I like the melody's simple, just flat out. She doesn't write complex tunes,
Mhm.
but it's the soundtrack she songwrites into it, like The Architect, like Jade Green, like Cardinal. Like those are where her bread is buttered. Those are what make her Casey Musgraves. It's
Mhm.
the songwriting. And if you watch her song The Architect at what was it was CMAs,
Mhm.
just her spotlight guitar and had everyone moved from it. That's what Casey Musgraves does well, and that's what makes Deeper Well so good.
Yeah. I think that there was an award for best vibes. This album takes it by a mile. Like she's
Mhm.
such a vibes-based artist at this point. Like Golden Hour proved like, oh, she's so good with soundscapes. And then she kind of doubled down on that with Starcross, where it was an album mostly of just like vibes and soundscapes. And it kind of lost me a little bit. But you're right. I think A Deeper Well achieves a balance for her, like a middle ground between those two zones. And like, yeah, I think it's a lot of great songwriting here. You shouted out Cardinal. I think that's my favorite on the record. Uh, and yeah, I think there's some really strong songwriting. I agree with you, 100%. It just wasn't strong enough for me this year. But like, generally speaking, though, I'm glad to see her getting back in her zone, back in her lane. Like, and I think that if she just keeps going, I mean, she's gonna have quite a library of classics by the end of this.
Oh, no doubt. When she gets in like 5 years, does her own like not really an Eras tour, but the best
Yeah.
of tour.
Mhm.
Definitely got a lot to choose from.
Mhm.
But I still have three more albums ahead of that. So coming in at number three was an album that technically started at my number five slot. Well, technically it was off my album, off my list. I didn't want to put it on my list. And then I went back and listened to it. Then I put it at number five. And then I put it at number four. And then I figured, you know what? It really is that good. So I put it at number three. Could have put it any higher, and we'll get to those two. But I'm talking about Act Two, aka Cowboy Carter from Beyonce. Probably a
Oh,
surprise to most people listening to this song, to this end of the year list here.
yeah.
Because I'm it's not an album that I really went back and listened to after it first came out the first couple times. But when doing this end of the year list, when I went back to it, the more I sat and listened with it, the more I was like, this is better than I initially gave it credit for. There's a lot of good songwriting in here that I may have either dismissed or just wasn't feeling at the time.
Mhm.
There's also a lot of interesting music choice in here, especially coming from Beyonce and her record team to put a country album out for Beyonce. She knocks it out of the park here. It's not just a good album, it's a good country album, and it just comes out of the gate hot. Um, Even those first two singles, Texas Hold'em, hit the charts, stayed on the charts. It's a really good song. I think there's outside of 16 Carriages was the second single, which I enjoyed, but not as much. There are other songs on here, including Blackbird and Bodyguard, and even her own take of Jolene, which was so unique and so fascinating that I was like, I think that was when I turned and was like, okay, this has to be higher because it's just so much of a unique thing that putting it lower feels like a disservice to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great record. It's an honorable mention for me. I forgot to list in my honorable mentions.
Mhm.
I think it's for me. It was so good almost that I was like, oh, I don't know if I like need to listen to this all the time. This feels like a piece. There's just certain albums that just feel like, oh, I listened to it, I absorbed it, I got what it was trying to do, and I've taken it with me. Like I've moved on and taken it with me. But it's not necessarily like a piece of entertainment I need to listen to over and over again. That's how Cowboy Carter felt for me. I do think the singles are great. Like you mentioned Texas Hold'em, especially Bodyguard. Bodyguard's the one that stuck with me. That bass
Mhm.
line, man, that slaps. But like other than that, though, like it is a very long record with a lot of different things. It kind of falls into that Halsey category for me, where it's like maybe it tried a little too much. And I think that maybe that's why culturally it has kind of disappeared from the conversation. Also, it was kind of an early hint at what this country renaissance that we saw in 2024 would come up with Shabuzi having the number one song of the year, doing a country pastiche. And there's so and then Post Malone's country record. It was kind of like a peek into what was to come. And of course, as she always does, Beyonce was there first. But yeah, like I think it's an album that will have more of a conversation in Grammy time. I do think that this is a strong, maybe in my opinion, the strongest contender going into that race. Uh, and maybe it'll get comeuppance there because I do think it's a great record, but I don't think anybody's wrong to have not maybe forgotten is a strong word, but to have like put it on the bench a little this year because of just how much has happened since April. Like it's been a long
Right.
year.
It's been a long year. I also think it's not something that you're going to put the album on and listen to all the way through. Like you said, it's akin to a really, really stupidly good movie where you're gonna watch it, you're gonna absorb it, you're gonna love it. It's gonna win Best Picture.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be like, okay, I want to go back to this movie every year. Oh, it's on TV. I want to go watch it. Oh, like, I don't know what I want to watch. Let's go back to that movie. No, there's other stuff that you're going to be more comfortable going back
Yeah.
to and having a good feeling with. But that doesn't discount how incredibly good this album
Yeah.
is.
It's good. I think Renaissance is better, but this is good.
Yes. All right. I do have two more albums above it, though. And both these albums I listened to, oh God, unlimited amount of times if I could. And where I place these two could go back and forth. You could call them 1A, 1B, but because we can't do that, it's going to be 2 and 1. So coming in at number 2 is from an artist I would have never thought would have made my top 5. But the album came out in June at just the right time, at just the right peak, and probably just because it hits me at just the right time in my life. I am overly impressed with Luke Combs's Fathers and Sons album.
Whoa.
Not what you
This
were
is
expecting, was it?
this is an artist that you straight up said last year you did not like.
Oh, I might write it. I started with, do I like Luke Combs? No. Do I still like Luke Combs? No. I
But
still don't think he's a good artist. But this album in particular,
Mhm.
front to back, as a concept album of a father talking to his son about being both a son and a
Yeah.
father and what it means to be both that man in your son's life, but also how you reflect on your own father throughout this whole album, I think just hits me personally
Yeah.
and brings tears to my eyes. I was listening to this album yesterday, like just thinking like, okay, I know it's at my number 2. I already placed it here. Does it deserve the number 1? At times it feels like it. At times this album just hits me in particular, which is why it's my top 5 list, not like overall top 5 list.
Right.
It's my personal top 5 list where it's an album that hits me and affects me directly. And that's why it's this far up, high up here.
It hit you right
Still
in the
don't like Luke
dad.
Combs. Right? Yes, right in the dad heart. Still don't like Luke Combs.
Yeah.
Just still don't, not gonna like actively seek him out for a concert. Which is
Is
probably
his
why he's number 2 and not number 1.
yeah, so how does this make you feel in retrospect about his fast car cover?
Uh I like Fast Car. I like
Yeah,
the original
that's
Fast Car
fair.
better than his cover Fast
I
Car.
mean, yeah.
Yeah. But I think having listened to Fast Car just multiple times, not on my own accord, because of doctor's own accord,
Mhm.
uh, that doctor's orders were just Fast Car was like the song of the song for her. That's like, okay, Luke Combs comes out with an album. Let me take a listen to this.
Yeah.
And although I didn't really like his what was previous one, like getting growing up and getting old or something, like
Something
double
like that,
album.
yeah.
This one just is a really, really good album. If you're a father, you're a son, it's a manly album without being too manly and gives you manly man tears
Fair enough.
multiple times over. But alas, it is
But
not my number one album.
no.
And I bet you could just guess what my number one album is.
I mean, I called it as soon as I heard it.
Yes, call me biased, call it fandom, call me a stan, whatever you want. I dropped the hint at the top of the podcast here, but it is Linkin Park's return with not just a new singer, but a new album with From Zero.
Yeah, before you start, I just wanted to say briefly, it's like, but this was not necessarily always a guarantee. Like when we first started hearing about this, it was unclear what direction they were going to go. But
Mhm.
before we knew about the singer, we were still like, well, I don't know. Like before Chester's passing, they had tried some experiments that didn't always work. They had put out a handful of records that were doing different things. And it was unclear about what the future of the band would look like, even with looking beyond like Chester's passing. Like, so the fact that one, they reunited at all, two, that they got a new singer at all, three, that they got past controversy caused by that singer
Mhm.
and still put out a record as good as it was is incredible to me. And like their story this year, there's just the arc of Linkin Park to get to this point is wild. It was a wild roller coaster ride that they even were able to put something out, and it was sounded as good and cohesive as this.
Yeah, I mean, when they came out in the middle at the beginning of September, just out of nowhere saying, "Hey, surprise Linkin Park concert online," and
Yep.
then surprise, we have a new singer, and then surprise, we're going to do a show in 5 days, and then we went to said
And we
show.
went there. Yeah.
Uh, and I think going to that show more or less kind of won me over that it's going to be okay. They
Yeah.
know what they're doing here. The albums that they did put out in between the death and now were more or less just um, anthology albums for Paper Cut and for Meteora, the 20th anniversaries of them. They did put out a couple of singles using some lost vocals. Well, not
Yeah.
lost, but some
Recovered
archived
vocals.
vocals
Yeah.
from Chester Bennington. So to have a new album come out and not call it like a new, not like call it Linkin Park 2.0, not call it something else, not renaming the band, saying
Right.
that we're still Linkin Park and we're still going to put out Linkin Park songs, and Mike
Mhm.
Shinoda is still going to write a goddamn hook that's going to be stuck in your head, and they're going to put out a rock ass concert that you're going to sit there and enjoy and sing every single word because you're a super fan. Because you specifically listen to the entire discography, so you are a super fan.
Something like that.
That I couldn't put it anywhere except at number one. Because once again, this is an album for me. This is a list of me. If I had to pick an album, it's going to be for me. And I listened to this thing nonstop. Also, the album, not that long. It's like 30 minutes. You get through it quickly, which means you
Yeah.
want to get through it again,
Yeah.
and then again, and then again. And there's not a song in here that you really want to skip either. It
Yeah.
all flows.
Yeah, I agree. I think that for me, someone who had just finished listening to all of their discography and figured out what where like where I appreciate, what I don't appreciate from their style, like what worked for them, what didn't work. And yeah, I think this album is it felt like they did the same thing almost, where they looked at their entire career and were like considered, okay, what did we really enjoy doing? What do we want to do again that we hadn't done in a while? What are the sounds that we want to cherry pick from all the eras, if you will, of the band? And how do we synthesize that into a cohesive record? And the fact that they did that in it's only 30 minutes is really impressive because they do manage to span almost every kind of sound that they played with previously. There are pop songs here. There are new metal songs, straight up new metal songs that sound like they could have been on Meteora here. There are more experimental electronic stuff here, just like they did on what was it, A Thousand Suns, was their like
Hmm.
experimental kind of thing. Um, like so, and then the kind of hard rock stuff that they played with later on, like that's all here. It's all represented in different songs, but somehow it doesn't feel wild and separate. They managed to make it feel cohesive even within trying all those different sounds. And the fact that they pull it off as well as they do, like I said, is impressive. This is an album that I respect from a band that, yeah, I think I do respect. I might not like them in the same way that you don't like Luke Combs, but this is an album that I can look at and be like, yeah, I respect this. There's real craft here. They really thought about what they wanted to do. And honestly, despite the controversy and like knowing what we know about her, I think the addition of Emily Armstrong is part of why this works because I think she does bring an element of pop songwriting to the mix that I think improves the overall product personally. The super fans can debate about that on a message board or a Discord somewhere. But that's my personal feeling coming from more of the pop side and going looking in. I think that it has improved what they're doing, and it makes me actually kind of excited for what they do now, like what they do next. I want to hear more songs from this Linkin Park because I can think this Linkin Park has the chance, like, has a real opportunity here to do something different, not just a replay. The replay was good, it worked, but I'm curious about what's beyond that. Can they stretch this range? I want to see what else they do here, and that's exciting.
Yeah. And that's why Linkin Park's our album of the year. I don't know. I mean, that's where we have to go next, though, is that, yeah, Linkin Park is my album of the year, but we have to determine what our Media Boat album of the year is. So we don't really
This
have
is
a whole
impossible.
lot of crossover.
No.
Do you just want to crown Linkin Park? I'm fine with that.
I mean, yeah, I think that that's fair. Like I said, I might not like it, but like I can respect it and I see what it's doing. I mean, it's pretty much. I think it's down to three, right? I think the three things that we all that or four. I think it's down to four things that we listen to together. I think
Mhm.
it can be Linkin Park, it could be Brat, it could be Taylor, and it could be Casey.
Yes, I think Taylor and Casey were number 5 and 4 on my list, whereas Brett was number
Mhm.
3 on your list. I did enjoy Brett. Yeah, like you said, it was a Brett summer, and Brett and just Charlie XCX had a big year herself coming out. I mean, not coming out of nowhere, but like coming from into a mainstream pop album
Right.
and getting involved in stuff beyond just the music industry. Then there's Linkin Park, who everyone counted was just a uh, dead band. Just they're not going to be out anything new, and to come out basically in the back fourth quarter of the year here, back third of the year, and surprise everyone, not just with like I said, not with the new singer, a new album. They were in the League of Legends with their new album as well, and just like explode immediately with the world tour.
Yeah.
Just be like, we're doing a world tour immediately before we even put the album out, and people lined up and sold out all those arena shows.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
you
think
can go
it's
either
that
way.
I but I also get that Brat's just kind of not your vibe.
Yeah. I
To
mean,
put
to be
it
fair,
lightly.
you did go to a Linkin Park concert, so
I
I think
did.
that kind of puts it.
Yeah, the Media Boat podcast did go together to a Linkin Park concert this year. So yeah, I'm okay with putting it there. Like, I'll put my stamp of approval on it. I didn't listen to it a whole lot. I think I maybe listened to it twice. But
Yeah.
like, I get why it's so important to you, and I wholeheartedly support it. So yeah, we can name that number one. Why
Yes. Not since 2017
not?
as a Linkin Park album. Well, one cracked my top five
Yeah,
for obvious reasons.
so now I believe that I think it's the only sec repeat winner besides Taylor here on the Media Boat podcast. So Lincoln Park is gunning for Taylor's spot.
Yes, it is. Gotta wait for 2 more years for the next album.
Yeah. So sorry, Taylor, you're not number one this year.
No, you're not. Congratulations to Lincoln Park.
Hmm,
Your trophy's in the mail. But we're
fantastic.
not done yet,
No.
as this episode may be wrapped up, but you'll be able to unwrap more episodes in the near future here.
Indeed, yes, you can join us for future wrap-up episodes. We have video games, television, and movies still to come. You can get those in two ways. You can get them in video form on our YouTube channel. Just search Media Boat Podcast there. You can also get them in audio form. They'll be up on the normal podcast feed, which you can find by searching Media Boat Podcast on any of your podcatchers of choice, including, unfortunately, Spotify, even though we trashed them earlier. But chances are that's probably where you're listening to us. So, hello, Spotify. But yeah, you can find our future episodes as well as our normal episodes on both of those. So go ahead, look for that. Unless they're already up right now, then
Yeah.
you can listen to it right now.
You're still in my line there. Unless you're listening to it in the, say it right. Unless you're listening to this in the future, in which case
Right.
you can listen to all of it right now.
All right. See you guys.
All right, bye.